In the world of crime, there are robberies, and then there are legends. One robbery was so bold, so clean, and so deadly that it didn't just make headlines. It became Hollywood history. If you've ever watched Goodfellas, you've seen it dramatized. But the real story, it's far darker than the movie ever dared to show. In the early morning hours of December 11th, 1978, a group of masked gunmen stormed a Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK Airport in New York City. In less than 90 minutes, they vanished with nearly $6 million in untraceable cash and jewels. A haul so massive, it's still considered one of the largest robberies in American history. But while the crime was nearly perfect, the aftermath was a nightmare. What followed was a cold-blooded spree of murders, betrayals, and lifelong paranoia. Because when you're dealing with that much money, no one can be trusted. This is the true story of the Lufthansa Heist, the robbery that inspired Goodfellas, but left a real trail of blood behind. By the 1970s, JFK Airport had become one of the most important cash transfer hubs in the world. Planes arriving from overseas, especially Germany, would land carrying millions of US dollars. The money would be temporarily stored in the Lufthansa cargo building before being picked up by the Federal Reserve. The vault often held up to $5 million in cold, hard cash, and sometimes even more in uncut jewels. But here's the catch. The security was a joke. There were no alarms in the vault itself. Just a couple guards working the graveyard shift. No surveillance cameras inside. No motion detectors. It was only a matter of time before someone realized that this wasn't a bank. It was an open invitation. That someone was Jimmy the Gent Burke, a well-known associate of the Lucchese crime family. He was smart, calculated, and completely without conscience. Every great heist needs an insider. And this one had Louis Werner, a Lufthansa employee with a gambling problem and debts he couldn't pay. Werner had access to shipment schedules, vault routines, and most importantly, knew when the vault would be full and unguarded. In exchange for wiping his debts, he gave Jimmy Burke everything he needed. With that intel, Burke began to handpick a crew. Not random thugs, but specialists. Men who could move quietly, follow orders, and most importantly, keep their mouths shut. The crew included Angelo Sepe, lookout and driver; Louis Cafra, responsible for logistics; Tommy DeSimone, a violent enforcer, later portrayed by Joe Pesci in Goodfellas; Frankie Carbone, Burke's longtime trusted man; Parnell Stacks Edwards, getaway driver, musician, and cleaner. Each of them had a role, and they rehearsed it over and over, until it was second nature. At around 3 a.m. on December 11th, 1978, the heist began. The crew drove up to the Lufthansa terminal in a stolen Ford van. They wore ski masks, carried guns, and moved with cold, calculated precision. They took 6 employees hostage, tied them up, and forced the supervisor at gunpoint to unlock the vault. Inside was a staggering $5 million in cash and $875,000 worth of jewels, mostly uncut diamonds, impossible to trace. They loaded the van, left the hostages alive, and vanished into the early morning fog. No shots fired, no alarms triggered, no one dead. On paper, it was the perfect crime, but the paper doesn't tell you what happened next. Jimmy Burke was no fool. He knew the real risk came after the job was done, so he laid down one rule: don't touch the money. Don't make big purchases. Don't draw attention. And within days, people started making stupid mistakes. One crew member bought a brand new pink Cadillac for his wife. Another bragged about his cut in a nightclub. Burke saw it all, and what he saw was a threat to his freedom. So he started tying off loose ends with bullets. In the world of crime, was Parnell Stacks robberies. He was supposed to torch the getaway van. One robbery but left it parked on the street. So fingerprints intact, and so Burke sent Tommy DeSimone that it didn't just make headlines. Edwards was shot. It became Hollywood history. That was just the beginning. If you've ever watched over the next year, you've seen it dramatized. People connected to the heist, but the real story vanished or turned. It's far darker than the Louis Cafra ever dared and his wife were never seen. In the early morning hours of Angelo Sepe was shot and killed in 1984. A group of masked Tommy DeSimone Lufthansa mysteriously disappeared at JFK Airport, rumored to have been murdered by the Gambino in less than 90 minutes. After killing one, they vanished with nearly $6 million in untraceable cash and jewels. Jimmy Burke was cleaning
massive.
house. It's still considered
because
one
the
of
cops
the
were
largest
closing
robberies
in,
in American
but
history.
because paranoia
But while the
had set
crime
in,
was nearly perfect,
he didn't trust anyone.
The aftermath,
and
was
he
a
had reason
nightmare.
not to.
What
The
followed
FBI
was a
immediately
cold-blooded spree of
suspected
murders,
Burke,
betrayals,
his associates,
and lifelong
but there was a problem.
paranoia. No
Because
fingerprints
when you're
at the
dealing
scene,
with that much
no
money,
cameras,
no one
no
can be trusted.
confessions. This is the true
only
story
real
of the
witness,
Lufthansa heist.
the employees tied
The
up
robbery
during the
that
robbery,
inspired
couldn't
Goodfellas,
identify
but
anyone.
left a real trail
Still,
of blood
the feds
behind.
knew who was behind.
By the
it.
1970s,
They just couldn't prove it.
JFK
That changed
Airport
when
had
Henry
become
Hill,
one of the most
Burke's former
important
friend and
cash
partner,
transfer hubs
got
in the
arrested on
world.
drug charges.
Planes arriving
Facing
from
a long
overseas,
prison sentence,
especially
Hill
Germany,
flipped.
would
He
land
entered the witness
carrying
protection
millions
program
of US dollars
and began talking
the money would be
about the
temporarily
Mafia,
stored in the
the drug
Lufthansa cargo
operations,
building
and
before
the
being
Lufthansa
picked up
Heist.
by the Federal
Much of
Reserve.
what we know today,
The vault often
names,
held up to $5
the
million
murders, the
in
details,
cold,
comes
cash,
from Henry Hill's own
and sometimes
testimony.
even more in
And that
uncut
testimony
jewels.
brought the
But
whole
here's the catch.
underworld crashing
The security
down.
was a
Despite
joke.
years
There were no
of
alarms in the
investigation,
vault itself.
no one
Just
was
a couple
ever
guards
convicted
working
of
the
Lufthansa
graveyard
Heist.
shift.
No
Jimmy
surveillance
Burke was
cameras
sentenced to
inside.
prison.
No
But for
motion
unrelated
detectors.
charges,
It was only a
involving
matter of
point
time
shaving
before
for
someone
college
realized
basketball.
that this
He
wasn't
died
fake.
behind bars in
It was an open
1996,
invitation.
without
That
ever
someone was
admitting to the
James,
robbery.
Jimmy
And
the
money,
Gent Burke.
gone.
A
Not a
well-known
single dollar
associate
of
of
the
the
Lucchese
has ever
crime
been
family.
recovered.
He
Some
was
say
smart,
Burke laundered
calculated,
it for offshore accounts,
and completely without
Others believe he
conscience.
buried it.
Every great
Literally,
heist needs an
in
insider.
remote fields.
And this one had
stashing
Louis
bags
Warner,
of cash
a
like
Lufthansa
paranoid
employee
pirate.
with a gambling
The only
problem
thing we know for
and
sure
debts he
is
couldn't
that
pay.
no one lived
Warner
long
had
enough
access to
enjoy
shipment
it.
schedules.
The Lufthansa
vault
Heist
stands
stands
as one of the most
importantly,
iconic unsolved
knew when the
crimes
vault
in
would be
American
full
history.
and unguarded.
Not because
in
of how it
exchange
was
for
done,
wiping his debts,
but because of
he
what it
gave Jimmy
cost.
Burke
It was a
everything
crime
he
built
needed.
on trust.
With that intel,
but executed
Burke
in
began to
fear.
handpick a
Every
crew.
man involved
Not
knew
random
score.
thugs,
And
but
yet most
specialists,
of them couldn't
men
help
who could move
themselves.
quietly.
They saw the
follow
money as
orders,
freedom.
and most
But in the
importantly,
Mafia, money
keep their
rarely
mouths
means
shut.
freedom.
The crew
It means
included.
you're next.
Angelo
Jimmy
Sepe
Burke thought he
look
could
out
outsmart
smart
the system.
Louis
And in a way,
Caffer,
he did.
responsible
He
for
outsmarted the
logistics.
law.
Tommy D.
outsmarted
Simone,
his enemies.
a violent
But his
enforcer,
paranoia was stronger
later
than his
portrayed by Joe
loyalty.
Pesci in Goodfellas.
He killed to stay free.
Frankie Carbone,
And in doing so,
Burke's longtime
he destroyed the
trusted
very
man.
crew that
Parnell
helped him pull
Stacks,
off the perfect
Edwards,
robbery.
getaway
And that's
driver,
the truth behind
musician,
the legend.
and
This
cleaner.
wasn't just a robbery.
Each of them had
it was
a
a
role,
slow motion
and they
massacre
rehearsed it
disguised
over
as
and
a
over.
payday. Until it was
Today,
second nature.
the Lufthansa Heist
At around
remains
3
unsolved.
a.m. on
The
December
FBI
11th,
still lists it as an open
1978.
case.
The heist
And from
began.
time to time,
The crew drove
new
up to
leads
the
appeared.
Lufthansa terminal.
But the truth may have been buried along with the
They
bodies
wore
of
ski
those who
masks,
knew too much,
carried guns.
This is the
and
real
moved with
cost
cold,
of silence
calculated
in a world
precision.
of organized
They took
crime.
6 employees
Because in the
hostage,
Mafia,
tied them
it's not
up,
the robbery that gets you
and forced the
killed,
supervisor at
it's surviving
gunpoint
to
to unlock the vault. Inside was a staggering $5 million in cash and $875,000 worth of jewels, mostly uncut diamonds, impossible to trace. They loaded the van, left the hostages alive, and vanished into the early morning fog. No shots fired, no alarms triggered, no one dead. On paper, it was the perfect crime, but the paper doesn't tell you what happened next. Jimmy Burke was no fool. He knew the real risk came after the job was done, so he laid down one rule: don't touch the money. Don't make big purchases. Don't draw attention. And within days, people started making stupid mistakes. One crew member bought a brand new pink Cadillac for his wife. Another bragged about his cut in a nightclub. Burke saw it all, and what he saw was a threat to his freedom. So he started tying off loose ends with bullets.